Hello and welcome to this episode of Standing Apart, the podcast that explores why being different is a superpower, with me, Nigel Ridpath. In this episode, I'm going to take an in-depth look at the importance of existing customers, why so many businesses love the thrill of the hunt, but ignore the need to farm with the same gusto. Plus, we'll have my regular features, my 1-minute rant and superhero of the week. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe, rate and like it on your favourite podcast app. It really helps spread the word. Thank you. You will know by now that I love to offload. There are all sorts of things that wind me up, believe me. And each episode I get to have a rant, but in the interest of my well-being, I limit myself to no more than 1 minute. So, here is this week's 1-minute rant. Start the clock. It would be too obvious to do something about the man in the White House, so I've opted instead for Companies House here in the UK. Right, so Companies House has been granted more authority to tackle the pervasive issue of corruption, yet they've only managed to recover a paltry £1,250 in fines. Seriously? They're meant to be a key player in cracking down on fraud and money laundering, not merely issuing symbolic gestures that are largely ignored. That is hardly a deterrent. We have a situation where companies are being registered with ridiculous, blatantly fictitious names, and Companies House themselves admit that a substantial proportion of the information they hold, possibly up to 20%, could be inaccurate. Their grand solution to this systemic problem? To issue fines that barely anyone seems to be paying. It's rather disappointing to say the least. The agency is supposed to be a crucial component in our defences against economic crime, but their enforcement efforts appear to be severely lacking. We need decisive action, not just vague promises of improved debt collection at some point in the future. The integrity of our economy and our reputation on the global stage demand better. Excuses about phased implementation simply don't cut it when we're talking about tackling serious financial misconduct. The government needs to ensure that Companies House is both adequately resourced and held accountable to effective enforcement of the regulations. Stop the clock. For this episode on maximising revenues from existing customers, I've invited along my friend and colleague Tamara Phelan. Tamara and I help organisations with their commercial skills, including account management, through a variety of advisory services, coaching and training. So I thought she'd be the perfect person to bring along and have a discussion on this topic. Thanks for taking a bit of time out of your afternoon tomorrow to have a chat with me about how organisations can make more out of their existing customers. There's a few questions that I'd like to ask you. Obviously, it does depend on what industry you're in, but where we've operated for most of our careers, the software services industry, more businesses are good at hunting rather than farming. From your experience, why do you think that is?
That's a really interesting question, Nigel, and something that you and I have spoken on previously. So, from my own perspective, I think I've tended to work in businesses where account management has actually been a focus because I think it's an area that I find really interesting. So where I've gone, I've created that interest. It's followed me. But I think the wider industry that we're in, there's a number of reasons. I think the type of salespeople that people hire and the focus on a business and the desire for net new logos, really the type of behaviors that businesses are driving are creating and incentivizing hunters rather than farmers.
Yeah. And we'll come on to it shortly because I think you and I both agree that the attributes for people in, whether they're hunting or farming is, they can be different.
Yeah.
And so, it's clear that people are hiring more of the hunter type mentality people. But I guess it still comes back to the question, when we speak to organizations about the low hanging fruit that can exist in account management if you do it right. It's interesting that these organizations, tend to get more excited about the more difficult bit.
It's crazy,
Why
isn't
is
it?
that?
I don't know. It's crazy when you consider the effort of creating a new logo. So going through the sales process, there's more and more procurement processes that are making it even more difficult to get build a relationship and get close to the customer. Then you've got to look at the preferred suppliers list. There's so much that you need to do,
Yeah,
especially with enterprise accounts. You're almost looking at 3 to 6 months once you've agreed that you're going to do business together to actually get the business going.
yeah,
So I mean, it does seem crazy that once you have secured the sale, once you've convinced the customer that, you're the right business to help them achieve their goals, that you've mitigated the risk of bringing in an unknown entity,
yeah,
that you've gone through all of this process to then go and repeat it. Like it's crazy. And I think, yeah, I mean, part of it is the attributes, as you say, the type of attributes in the salespeople that we've got, the behaviors that we're incentivizing. If we look at characteristics, I've sat across both roles and run a sales team that have had both role types within them. And the net new sales people tend to be more competitive,
yeah,
more resilient, more persuasive. They tend not to be the type of people that want to build the relationships.
yeah,
They want to win, succeed, throw it over the fence and move on.
yeah,
Whereas the type of characteristics that you get on the other side, you get more of the relationship type builders, the problem solvers. I still think you need challengers there as well. I mean, personally, I've worked both sides and I love the account management and account development side because you start to build a relationship, you show, that you're delivering, you build the trust. And then you can use the sponsorship to reach other parts of the business, and
yeah,
the internal referrals is so much easier than starting from scratch.
yeah,
You already understand the personalities, the challenges, the budgeting, the process. You're on the preferred suppliers list. So yeah, I mean it just doesn't make sense, but the attributes are different. Like for me, I like to build it, I like to build relationships and then challenge them and then
yeah.
move on and utilize my relationships. But people that don't have that natural inclination, they just don't want to hang around.
Yeah,
They
I'm thinking of one or two industries outside where we've tended to operate, where they would be, for instance, very cognizant about how, what the cost of acquisition of a customer would be. So, for instance, if you're selling credit cards or you're a domestic energy supplier or whatever, one of their key metrics would be cost of acquisition. How much it
yeah,
costs us to find every customer. And I just wonder on these big ticket items where that number is so scary that people don't measure it.
don't measure it. Yeah, exactly.
And that in a way, if they did, then maybe that would tip the balance a bit more.
Yeah,
If you thought, well, we're bringing on, a 500K deal, but actually, if we're really honest with ourselves, this has cost us 80K to sell it.
yeah.
Actually, does that make sense anymore?
Yeah, and the complexity of enterprise size deals as well. You've got sales, you've got pre-sales, you've often got delivery staff.
Yeah,
You've got the sales process to go through. And you're right, it can take months. And the amount that notches up as an investment, I think you're right. I think if we looked at that cost, people would be more inclined to want to maximize the value within the account.
Yeah, whereas in those sorts of industries that I just mentioned, where they're really conscious of that cost of acquisition, the other metric that they're really conscious of is the customer lifetime value. So
Yeah.
going back to my example, a 500k deal, 80k to sell it, actually, and then if you look at all of those deals where you put in 40, 50, 60k's worth of effort and you didn't win it, you
Mm,
start evening that out, and that can end up being a pretty horrible number. But it's not horrible if you look at it in the fact that that customer might deliver you 1.5 million over the next 6 or 7 years, which is how the
exactly.
credit card people and the energy people and those sorts of industries would think about it more.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange that some the harder it is to sell and the more costly it is to sell, the less we're kind of conscious of how much we're spending on it.
Yeah. I mean, something else slightly off topic is once you have passed over into delivery and you're looking at the type of people that you want to nurture the account, another bugbear of mine, and I know we've talked about this before, is so many businesses put their junior salespeople, people that they think might be able to make it, and go and put them on as an account manager. And it's like,
Yeah,
if an account has the potential to deliver £1 million or 2 or 3 million, depending on how well you develop that account, why wouldn't you want to put your best people there?
exactly. Exactly. Maybe different sort of people, as we've discussed, but
Yeah.
good people nevertheless.
Your wander off into looking at other industries has a question rise in me. Some businesses traditionally aren't focused on account management. For example, a bathroom showroom or a kitchen business. You win a deal, you do the installation. Some people might have two bathrooms, so you might be able to come back, but most people have only got one kitchen. So is it that in some industries people just don't see the opportunity? And what's your thinking there?
Let's say a kitchen business, for instance, you might spend, I don't know, 25 grand on a new kitchen, and then, in my experience, you'd never hear from that company again. Um, and I think it is possibly about a mindset shift and the ability to be a little bit creative. I think that maybe compared to the initial installation, the further things that you potentially could sell would be fairly low ticket items. I'm thinking like extended warranties on the appliances, and their renewals. Maybe there are some new products or innovations in kitchens that come out that could be retrofitted. I don't know, doing a little bit of a refresh exercise after a few years. Maybe have a look at the handles on all the doors and see if we can do a little upgrade from them to do a refresher. They may be low ticket items, but ultimately, at the point where that customer wants to fork out the next 25, 30 grand for a kitchen, you want to be in pole position. You want that relationship to still be established. So, although the rewards along the way might not be huge, it's actually the reward of being there for the next big deal that is the main prize. That's not to say that there isn't profit and revenue streams available if you can be a bit creative. And I think not enough people are creative and they do the thing that you just described, and that is go through all the effort to find that next big deal without maximizing the good relationship that they've already got with customers.
Yeah.
Coming back, if you're looking at trying to really build up the farming side of a business, so working with existing customers, what do you find are the sort of metrics that can be employed to create that mind shift?
So I think I would look at account penetration, stakeholders engaged, number of departments, functions touched, depth of relationship, and things like that. The customer lifetime value, obviously, the year-on-year growth. But I would look at, as a business, what other propositions and solutions have we got to upsell across in there? Net promoter score, customer churn rate, overall revenue growth, and CSAT scores, customer satisfaction scores.
Yeah, I think all of those are really important. And, it's really telling when we talk to businesses who are so hunting focused that they're not recording any of any of those. And one of the things that I think is a really valuable one out of those is that kind of product penetration score. I did some work with a business 2 or 3 years ago who came about as a result of a number of acquisitions. So they had a product set of about 6 core different categories of product, and their average penetration of product was 1.2. And they were still putting a hell of a lot of effort into bringing on new customers. Well, if you've got 6 products, but your product penetration is only 1.2, just getting that product penetration up to 1.5,
Or
1.8
two. Yeah.
is going to make an enormous amount of difference, and you don't have to find a single new customer in order to do it. It's just talking to those existing customers about the other things that you have to offer. And I think when I look at high growth businesses, they're doing that all the time.
Well, yeah, totally. And I think, interestingly, one of the ways that businesses don't look at this enough, and I know from working with you, this is a bugbear from you, is the role of marketing with current accounts.
Mm. What's striking me about this whole conversation is it's all a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you've got hungry hunters out there, they'll be putting a lot of pressure on marketing to be generating leads for them to go and chase down. And that's because it's very hard to get, as we've discussed, it's very hard to get those net new logos. So the more that they've got to run after, yes, you can do things about improving your win rate, but you still need to feed the hopper. And so if you're concentrating on acquiring new names, then you're going to be putting a lot of pressure and demanding a lot of the marketing budget on acquisition and conversion campaigns. But as we've said, the people in the account management arena tend to be left behind, and there's an awful lot of support that they can have from marketing to improve their win rate within the existing customer base. So obviously that would be cross-sell and upsell campaigns in order to grow those accounts. But there's also a lot, where marketing can really help in terms of retaining those customers. So having marketing in charge of the customer satisfaction surveys, maybe surveys about new products that you're doing, actually looking for customer input on that sort of thing, getting their opinion on the sort of services that you could be offering and improvements to existing services, can really make a difference, and marketing can really help with that. So I think if you think about building the relationship, I think marketing helps in 2 areas. One is that for customers, there's a growth element, but also in terms of retaining customers, it's about turning them into VIPs.
Yeah.
So just finishing off, I know you and I worked with a client last year whose business was unusually 100% focused on account management. Now, that might not be that unusual in some industries. We've got to understand that, but it is unusual in our
In ours.
industry. So, what was their story and what can we learn from it?
It's it's an interesting story. I think there's elements that we can learn both in a positive and a challenging way as well. So surprisingly, they didn't have any salespeople. Not only did they
Yeah,
not have salespeople, but sales was a dirty word to them, wasn't it?
yeah,
So what they'd done really well is they had created relationships within their customer base at strategic executive levels.
yeah,
They had really learned how to network, how to build relationships, how to deliver, build trust. And they were at the point where, they would be annually having budgeting meetings. So, what budget to put to one side for the work that they were planning to do.
and this is the customer's budget. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
I think something that's interesting there is the CEO is doing all of the selling, and we see this in smaller businesses. Now, that was working very well, and we know that a CEO gets a seat at a table, an exec table, in a slightly easier way than someone with sales in their title. But something that I would question is how scalable it is, how repeatable it is. Like there was only so much work that that person could facilitate.
Mm.
Luckily, they weren't interested in it new, but I don't think they could have spread themselves any wider, any thinner.
Yeah,
And it did mean that there was a dependency on that senior leadership team to hold all of those relationships.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
interesting and it shows us there's guidance as to how you can create a great account management focus in your business. But I do think there's elements that wouldn't be repeatable or scalable into other businesses.
Yeah, I mean, we use it as an example of an organisation at one end of the spectrum, just to open people's minds to, yeah, the value of doing it more than they're doing it at the moment. And the thing that I guess I'll never forget about that example is that even with some growth factored in, they didn't need to add a single new customer. And on day one of their financial year, they knew where all of that revenue was coming from. And you know that, compared to most organizations who've got to go out and fight for, all of that new business in that year, it's certainly feels quite a comfortable place to be. And as you and I have remarked so many times, if only they had a decent sales function on top of that as well, they could be
Yeah,
really flying. But it's a really interesting
model.
example of
Mm.
somebody at one extreme, and that other organization where I mentioned their product penetration of 1.2 told me what his goals were. They didn't need to sell a single new customer.
No,
They
just
just
go and
needed
farm the
to
ones they had.
they just needed to turn into the world's best cross-selling machine, which would have been kind of much easier, really. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to learn from all of this.
I don't know any other partner that I've either worked with for or in our new in the current position that we have as consultants that don't have an element of stress and at the end of the quarter, at the end of the
Mm,
half year,
yeah,
as we're pushing for. So I mean, just going into the new FY knowing that you've already hit your target.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's it's quite a comfortable place, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot to be admired. Wouldn't necessarily want to be them, but yeah, because I think there's even more that could be achieved. But yeah, it's amazing what you can get if you just put your mind to it and do the right things.
yeah.
Listen, Tamara, thanks so much for taking a bit of time out and chatting through this topic with me. I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the afternoon's sunshine, and we'll catch up very soon.
Lovely. Pleasure talking to you as always, Nigel. Take care.
And now it's time for my superhero of the week. Before each episode, I find someone or a business that is doing an amazing job of standing apart. This week, it's Michael Theo. Many of you won't recognise the name unless you've caught the recent Anglo-Australian comedy Austin. In his boyhood, young Michael Theo was diagnosed with autism, and, well, the doctors rather suggested his parents keep their expectations modest. He was non-verbal. But he developed a real passion for animated films and television, and that's actually what helped him find his voice. His teenage years weren't exactly a walk in the park, but everything changed when he reached his mid-20s. He decided he wanted to find a girlfriend, and that led him to appear on the television series Love on the Spectrum. And honestly, he just charmed everyone. Audiences in Australia and indeed all over the world absolutely adored him. He was just so wonderfully direct and, well, a proper romantic. It's a truly lovely story. Then a TV director came knocking to see whether Theo could act, and an unlikely dream became a reality. Despite starring along the wonderful Ben Miller and Sally Phillips, it is Michael, playing the title role, who gives the show its heart. The smart thing about the show and its writing is that Michael is clearly in on the jokes. He understands that finding sarcasm difficult to process as an autistic person has its funny moments. At no point do you feel that Michael's condition has been exploited. In fact, it is Michael's skills as an actor and his comedic input that elevates the show from a run-of-the-mill sitcom. You can catch Austin on the BBC iPlayer in the UK. So Michael, you are my superhero of the week. We're coming towards the end of the show. I hope you found it insightful. If you did, please tell your friends. Remember, all of the previous episodes are still available, including a fascinating two-parter with Hugh Taylor about building a great business. Deep dives into the retail sector, the music industry, and market disruptors, amongst others. I've got a great panel of guests talking about their journey to B Corp status lined up. Make sure you subscribe today to ensure you don't miss it. We're always keen to hear from you, particularly for our listeners' questions feature. Please send your questions to standingapartpod@hotmail.com. We're also looking for sponsorship for the show. If you want to discuss cost-effective sponsorship options, again, please contact us at standingapartpod@hotmail.com. This show can only survive with people listening to it regularly, and no matter how good we make it, we have to beat the dratted algorithms. So every subscribe, rating and like that you give it on your favourite podcast app really makes the world of difference. Go on, do it now. Thank you. Until next time, whatever you do, stand apart from the crowd. Standing Apart is a Sun Bear Consulting production.